Did I end up becoming a doctor on the basis of a bet? I don't know. It's possible, but
What is a myth about being a doctor in Australia?
I think one myth is clearly that doctors are rich.
Does the younger generation are much different than the older generation?
And I think it's okay. I think we should have a balance of people who like to work really hard and people who don't like to work really hard.
What is classed emergency?
In general, as the emergency college rarely actually discourages people seeking emergency help.
I think mental health is a problem.
I think mental health is a huge problem. The WHO reckons that I don't know the exact year, but I think in 2028 or 2030, they estimate that 52% of the world's population will be depressed.
Well, one advice you want to give to the audience or the younger generation who are watching?
Medicine's hard, but don't do it because you think it's flashy or it's a great way to make money, or your parents are insisting, that's what you got to do. That you'd regret down the line.
Hey guys, welcome to Studio 9. My name is Nitin Menon, and today's episode we have a very special guest who actually plays a very vital role in our community, who serves as an emergency specialist in Hervey Bay Hospital. He's also a clinical lead for AMC WBA program at Hervey Bay Hospital. He's also a president for Fraser Coast Local Medical Association, co-chair of IMG Reference Group of a Better Cultural Initiative, counselor in Council of Advisory Practice and Partnership. With a lot of accolades, let me welcome Dr. Ajith. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nitin. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, in today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to ask a lot of questions about his role, how he's come to Hervey Bay, and a lot more other things as we progress. So, Dr. Ajit, just tell us about yourself. How have you come to Hervey Bay, and just a bit of a journey in your medical practice?
Yeah, look, I grew up in the Middle East, in Kuwait actually. My parents were working there. My dad was an architect and mom was a nurse, so they were working at the ministry in Kuwait, and so I grew up there. I went to school there. I'd say it's pretty average, middle-class upbringing. Spent a lot of time watching TV and playing basketball.
I think we all did as kids.
Most of the TV I watched was American shows. So I think I've got some sort of influenced by American pop culture. And then I guess, towards the end of schooling, you got to try and decide, being an Indian child, you got to try and decide you're going to be a doctor or an engineer. I think it's fairly well known in the world that there's a bit of pressure on most Indian kids to decide early on whether that's what they want to do.
So were your parents in medical field? Or?
So mom was a nurse. She's retired now, and dad was an architect. I think there's probably some influence of mom to, sort of push us into the medical field. But I think it was at ninth or 10th grade, or maybe 11th, I'm not sure. But there was a teacher in school, and she's a biology teacher, and she's really great. And she said something along the lines of, I don't think anyone in this class will be able to enter, medical school.
It was more like a challenge.
Very, very much, I think. But look, it is true. The point she was making is, there were kids in India. They were, studying 18 hours a day, and they started with, 8th grade or 9th grade, and preparing for the really tough entrance examinations in India to enter medical school or engineering. And then compared to them, we were the, I guess, laid back kids, growing up in Kuwait that studied a week before the exam, that sort of thing. So she was very frank when she said, I don't think any of you will cut it. And I think there's a bunch of us that looked at that and said, well, hold on, that sounds like a challenge. So I don't know. I mean, if you're asking me, Nitin, did I end up becoming a doctor on the basis of a bet? I don't know. It's possible, but I was positively influenced by my mum, who's a nurse, and she held doctors in very high regard, and that certainly influenced us. So I did work hard towards studying for the entrance examinations, and luckily I was able to get through, and I got through into a good school in India. And when I finished, I wanted to go to the States because I felt. And this is sort of taking me back to, how I said American TV shows have influenced me a lot. You see the portrayal of doctors on American TV shows is quite, fantastic. I don't know if you watch shows like Emergency Room and.
I actually watch a lot of emergency room and everything, and that's one of my questions I want to ask: is it real or is it all made up?
Look, the TV show has a lot of extra drama, but most of the stuff that they talk about and the things you see are relatively real. Yeah, they do add a lot of spice and drama in terms of love-hate relationships and things like that. There's a lot of reality in those shows. So I want to go to the States, and then I had a year before I had to apply for that, and in that year I worked in a hospital in India. You're asking me how I got into emergency medicine, and I didn't want to get into emergency. I wanted to get into just general medicine, but I asked for a job there and they didn't have one. They said there's one in urology and emergency medicine. I didn't want to do anything with urology. So I took up the job in emergency medicine, and I found out that I wasn't doing very well. And I was very upset with myself that I wasn't doing as well as I should. So I immediately got 1 or 2 textbooks in emergency medicine and sort of in 4 days finished the entire book. And then I did really well, exceedingly well, that the hospital wanted to send me to the UK. They had some sort of arrangement with some sort of NHS hospital.
From Hervey Bay?
No, from India, in Kerala. And I said, yeah, sure. But in the meantime, I had applied widely, and regional Queensland actually responded early. And I said, whoever gets me first gets me. So that's how I ended up here. And then I started as a junior doctor, and I was able to progress quite quickly and finished most of my training in Brisbane. And then when I became an emergency consultant, I was looking for a job, and there was a few spots available. There was one in Bundaberg, Hervey Bay, and Mount Isa. I've worked in Bundaberg previously, and Mount Isa seemed really far, so I think the natural choice was Hervey Bay. But when I came to Hervey Bay, I thought I'll give it a year. I of course moved with family. I thought we'll give it a year and then move back to Brisbane. Yeah. And I suspect we just forgot. We just forgot that we were meant to move back. And that is because Hervey Bay is beautiful. The everything, like I tell people, that everything is a single-digit travel. You can be at home in 6 minutes. You can be at the beach. In 3 minutes you can be at work. In 7 minutes you can be at the kids' school. Like everything's single-digit. This might change, of course, with the real estate boom that's going on. But at the moment, that sort of. Compared to the commute in Brisbane, I think we love that everything's close by. We're not wasting a lot of time of our life, waiting in traffic. We like that there's a lot of outdoors component. We're lucky to have a big yard and kids can play around, and the people are really nice. And Nathan, you'll know this. You living here. I think we found the people to be kinder and nicer. Not to say that city is not nice and kind. They probably are. It's just that there's so much going on that people aren't able to display that. Yeah, right. Here, maybe it's because it is a slower pace that people are focused on, people relationships and friendships, and they have time for neighbors and things like that. So which we have come to love, and that's why we're still here in Hervey Bay 6 years in.
I think that's the beauty of regional, because I think everybody sees such a difference. Like in the city, when you go, nobody have time to talk to each other. Nobody has time to say, hey, hi, how are you? Good day, mate. How are you doing? You don't get to see that. But like when you walk on the beach, you can actually meet few people who actually say, hey, how are you doing today? How was your day? So I think that's the one thing that I really love about.
Yeah, it's almost like you feel like you've sort of not maybe not bypass, but stepped aside from the rat race. You're not quite in the main race lane. Sort of taken a sidestep a little bit, which at the end, even though it's a race, everyone comes to the same end.
Yeah, that's right. You're absolutely right. So, do you think like being an overseas like migrant coming to Hervey Bay, is it hard for doctors or nurses to come here and practice?
I think it's a good question, but it's a two-part question, isn't it? I mean, there's a part of, is it hard for someone for an outsider to move to a different country and I guess thrive, and then is it hard to do that as a medical professional or a nursing professional? And I think the answer is yes, it's hard, but like most things, hardness depends on the amount of effort that you decide to put in it. I think the people who decide to move from their comfort zone of their home country in the hometown, I believe they're kind of a special breed of people. They are people who are willing to move outside of their comfort zone, outside of their established connections and relations and the friends network and the relatives network and the social support that they have in their home country, in their hometown. These are the people who see something they want and they decided, yep, I'm going to move away from all of the support structure that I have to a foreign country, a foreign place, and start anew, and then hopefully build new relationships and new structures. And so I feel you've already sort of self-selected that special category of people who are willing to do tough things to get to where they want. And so is it tough? Yes, it's tough, but I think people who already made that decision know that it's going to be tough, but eventually it'll all be worth it. I think for me it was easy because I was born and raised in Kuwait, but as an Indian because my parents were Indian, and I stayed in Kuwait most of my life, and then spent some time working and studying in India, and then I spent some time in the States, and then I've come here to Australia. I see Australia as home, but I also see that all of these political boundaries, they're just man-made creations. The birds don't respect them, animals don't respect them. They're just imaginary lines that man has created. And do I respect them? Yeah, I respect them a little bit, but I also see that they're just artificial creations. They're imagined realities, and so I feel it's anyone should be able to move anywhere they want if that's what they want. Yeah. But I also recognize that I'm privileged in the sense that I've had the time and ability to sit and think about these issues, which it's hard to do nowadays. Of course, there's a cost of living crisis, and people are struggling just to meet ends. So there's really no time to sort of sit down and think about things. So I also see that I recognize that I'm privileged in my ability to sit and just think.
How challenging is it in current situation with being in medical field, like after COVID, coronavirus? We hear all this stuff that doctors and nurses are always under very much pressure and things like that. So is it a very generic, or is it actually true that?
I think there's certainly pressure, but it's pressure that I think most people working in this field sort of have gotten used to. And they accept that as part of their reality, that there will be pressure from work. And the advantage of most shift workers is, your shift's going to come to an end. Yeah. And then it's done. And then you're done and dusted, and you can go home and rest and sleep. And so is it challenging? Yes, it's challenging. I don't know that it's particularly more challenging than COVID times. But of course, there's while it's challenging, I also recognize that, it's a stable job. Whether you're doctors or nurses or, allied professionals, it's a stable job. And it's got some job security to it. And you get reasonably well paid for it. And so it's hard to complain. But at the same time, it's not a job that you can sort of drop at the drop of a hat. You can't say, well, I've had enough and drop, because the reality is to reach where you are, you've spent, like for example, in my case, the decision to go into this sort of medical line was probably made when I was in 9th or 10th grade. And so that's about 3 years of schooling, and then about 5.5 years of medical school, and then maybe another 7 years of emergency training. And so that's there's decades that's gone into this. So it's not like you can just wake up one day and say, hold on, I don't like this pressure anymore, I'm just going to switch, maybe I'll do some other job. That's not practical because of the amount of time and energy that you've put in. And most people who've gone into this, they've sort of sacrificed their youth. So the times that their engineering friends, for example, would be having the time of their life, enjoying their youth, traveling and meeting people and things. Those are the times we spend with books and things. So there are sacrifices, and a lot of sacrifices made to reach where we are. And so it's not easy to drop that too. People do, and people do step down a little bit. And I think going part-time is part of that. There is a doctor and nurse shortage all over the world, which is felt more in Australia. COVID's affected, I think it's probably affected I guess the intakes in medical schools and nursing schools, and it's probably affected people's outlook on what's important in life. Is it work that's important? Is it having a family time that's important? So a lot of people are choosing to not work necessarily full time. I step back and sort of realizing that money is not everything, and money can't add more happiness to your lives. And so people are stepping back, but at the same time, there's also a big big number of proportion of doctors, nurses who are sort of peri-retirement. So they'll also soon be retiring, and we just don't have the numbers to replace all of those who are about to retire. So there is going to be quite a crunch. It's going to be tricky times ahead. Will AI help? I don't know. We hope so. But in general, I think people sort of focusing on their health, mental and physical, should help. It'll hopefully keep them away from requiring medical care.
Yeah. So also being in a regional must be like very challenging for you guys to find people to come to regional town. Or is it kind of relatively easy?
Yeah, look, Nitin, it's always been a challenge to get people to come to regional towns. I mean, unless you actually come here and spend some time, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like asking someone to go into a really rural town or city or an island, and unless they've actually been there and realized, this is reasonable, it's okay, we've got roads and businesses and things to carry on just as normal. So unless actually people experience that, they're afraid, and they feel they'll be missing out from the hustle and bustle of the city. So it traditionally has always been hard to get people to go to regional areas, whether that's in Australia or elsewhere. But certainly in regional Queensland, it's harder to get qualified doctors and nurses to come. It's Hervey Bay is, I think, somewhat lucky, in which we have a very, very picturesque town and good people, and it's not too far away from Brisbane, so we're slightly advantageous that way. But it's certainly hard. I think in the medical field, I often tell people that you get to do a lot more than you would in a very busy tertiary center in the city, when there's a lot of competition to experience stuff and do procedures and things. So it's not as much in regional towns. So you get to do more, so you improve your skills better. So we do use that, and a lot of people do. People who come here experience that.
Is the retention rate for the doctors, I heard that it's around like 22%. Is that correct?
I think if you didn't do the WBA program, the retention rate was quite low. But if you came for the WBA program, the retention rate is significantly higher. I think it's 1.2 times or something like that. But essentially, the WBA is so for internationally qualified medical practitioners to come and work in Australia, you have to display your proficiency through a series of exams. So it's called an Australian Medical Council exam part 1 and then a part 2. Part 1 is a written examination, an MCQ type examination, which a lot of people do. And then there's a part 2. The part 2 is where you have to display your communication skills, your examining skills, your counseling skills in front of role players who are actors. And all this exam has been heavily criticized because a lot of people are marked down severely, and it's not realistic because of the use of actors. And so the WBA program was created as an alternative to this particular exam. So where doctors are examined while they work in the hospital with real patients, with real doctor supervisors. But it's a longer program. It takes about 12 months. We are lucky to have that here in Hervey Bay, and so we do attract a lot of overseas trained junior doctors here because of that, which is great because they then stay on, they live in the community, and they go on to, many of them are general practitioners in the community, so that sort of helps our GP shortage here. In general, once they achieve that, then they can usually get what we call general registration. General registration is you can work pretty much anywhere in Australia. And most people do, if they choose to work in specialties that are hospital based, like emergency medicine or ICU or medicine, they might stay on in the hospital. But a lot of them choose to work as general practitioners, and that's outside of the hospital, so community practitioners. So because a lot of them choose that, they come to Hervey Bay for the WBA program, and then they go on to live and work here and train here as general practitioners, and they finish their training and they go on to live here as general practitioners. So our GP shortage is actually not too bad compared to other regional towns that don't have the WBA program.
Okay. How does the technology play a role, especially in emergency department, with the AI and everything?
Yeah, I don't know that we're quite there yet, but I think we're slowly getting there. Like, for example, there's already there's some places where they're talking about, when people are waiting in the waiting room, instead of just waiting, you'll be given an iPad and where you enter your age and your gender and your problem and how long it's been and what else you're on, and in some cases, the iPad itself, if it's AI enabled, will be able to sort out a simple problem or refer you to the right service. So it might decrease waiting room times. That's one area. There are hospitals that actually use computer aided decision making as part of their resuscitation or emergency life saving measures. And that's basically as you're trying to save someone's life, on the side someone will be entering the details into the computer, and it'll sort of suggest, have you looked into this, have you looked into that. We haven't quite, it's not become standardized, so it's not being used everywhere, and we certainly haven't reached the point where it's become standard practice. But I think that could be the future. It depends on how AI sort of develops. I think there's certainly a lot of applications that we haven't even thought about just yet, but I think the more we think about it, certainly a lot of the less complex tasks can be offloaded to AI, and we have to, Nitin. I mean, there's a shortage of qualified professionals all around the world, and so it's not so much of should we. It's very much of when will it happen.
Does the younger generation are much different than the older generation? Like, do they spend more time at work? How does it work?
It's an interesting. So you're talking about the millennials and their work ethic. I don't know. I mean, I think like part of it is sort of thinking about have they gotten it right? Maybe we shouldn't be spending 75% of our time preparing for work, getting to work, at work, and then recovering from being at work, and then having say an hour when you're not thinking about work at home, when you're fatigued or tired or on your screen. Maybe they've got priorities correct. Maybe they've realized something that we've sort of just taken for granted, that this is our way of life. Most of our time is spent working, and then we sort of stretch out our retirement as much as possible to make more and more money. And then what do you do with all of the money? You're too old to spend it properly, so you leave it to your kids or grandkids, and I don't know if that's the right kind of life. So I don't know. I'm not too critical about millennials. I think, yes, some of them, they may have some dodgy work culture, but I don't know that that's a generational thing, Nathan. I think you look at any generation, you'll find dodgy people, or people who aren't necessarily having a very great work ethic, and I think that's okay. I think we should have a balance of people who like to work really hard and people who don't like to work really hard, because that's the only way who's working hard and who's not. If everyone did the same level of work, I think it'll be incredibly boring.
What is a myth about being a doctor in Australia?
Oh, I think one myth is clearly that doctors are rich. Doctors eventually do become rich. I mean, the older you get, and the more experienced you are, you do spend a lot of time working, and you don't have a lot of time to spend all of that money that you're earning, and so you do end up being reasonably well off. But that doesn't happen at all stages of being a doctor, particularly at your early stage of being a doctor, as a junior doctor, as your training doctor. Your salary is often less than a training nurse or a nurse at the time, and very much sort of starting level compared to other professions as well. And for several years, that's the case. And you also have to remember that a lot of these doctors are having debts of their own, so they would have gone into medical school and have, in Australia, it's a HEX debt, and elsewhere it'll be student debt. So sometimes that's in the $400,000-$500,000 debt. So as soon as you've just qualified, you're ready for work, and you already have this burden of $500,000 debt that you got to pay off. So when they're starting off, it is certainly a struggle. But as you grow, both advance in age and experience, and as the decades add on, you do become financially quite stable.
So if you have to choose a career, not being a doctor, what would be the second career?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think it's tricky. I really like physics in school. I liked math, so maybe I would have ended up as an engineer if it wasn't a doctor. It's quite possible.
So you kind of like always wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah, I think early on there's some influence, and then once somebody throws in here, it's hard or difficult, and you sort of, you always want to feel that you can do anything until adult life hits you and you realize you can't really do everything, right? But at least as a boy, that's what. And I think like all kids, you go through a phase where you want to be a professional basketball player, and you want to be an astronaut, and I think. I don't know. I haven't given a lot of thought of what would have been an alternate career, but I think as long as it has a bit of science, math, and physics, I think I would have enjoyed that.
With so much being like a busy schedule, how do you balance your family life and then your work and everything?
It's tricky. I mean, I think like most people nowadays, I also struggle with balancing everything that we're doing at work, outside of work, and then at home for family. What I lately do is, I look at my to-do list, and then I think about what's really going to make a difference for the things that I value and matter, and then I sort of focus on that for that day. It also means that a lot of things just forever remain on my to-do list. Sometimes I believe like I'm an expert with to-do lists. I've got to-do lists for my to-do lists. Which I don't know if it's an expert or that I'm sort of struggling with to-do lists. I do have a lot of lists.
Give us a bit of a sneak peek on your list.
Well, they're as simple as fix the the broken lock on the screen door or something, to things really complex like improve general health. So and could be even like I do have plans to eventually hopefully write a book and things like that. So you get these fleeting ideas that you don't know if it's actually worth the effort or time. And of course, with life being busy, it's always an excuse. Too busy for any of that, and who's going to read a book that you write? So you don't know. There's a big list. You look at the list and you think, do I strike it? Do I leave it? And then you leave things. So the list sort of develops. So it's almost a book's worth, the list itself.
One oh my God moment at work that this has happened.
Some of it I can probably not. I think what is profoundly impactful to me, I don't know if it's quite the oh my God that you're talking about, but when I was in medical school and I sort of spent some time in the pediatric, also children's ward, I got really emotional when I saw some kids that were sort of having some sort of genetic handicap or disability, and the amount of patience that the mum used to show, and sometimes the kids, they sort of act out, they physically hit their parents, and and the little kids, they don't know what they're doing. And it really, I got quite emotional at the time, and it was quite, I guess, eye-opening that it's not enough to sort of know, have the skills and have the knowledge. There's, you do have to become very mentally strong to be able to deal with suffering, human suffering on an everyday basis. Some of the sufferings, it's okay. It's like, oh yeah, a bit of pain. Some of them is true suffering, where people are really struggling and they don't want to live anymore sometimes, or they can't live anymore despite wanting to live anymore. So it can be quite a reality check. I think what helped is I was having a conversation about this, about how hard emotionally it was for me with my school English teacher, which I really liked, who I really loved as a teacher. And she said that, maybe God gives kids like that who need a lot of attention and care to parents who can provide that.
Okay.
And to me, that was very profound. I have always found that, the kids who have excessive needs. Nathan, I've got 2 kids. I feel their needs are excessive, but they're just 2 normal kids. And you add to that, I know as a parent how much of a struggle that is, and you add to that, the difficulty communicating, or the difficulty just doing ordinary tasks, and how much of an additional strain that might be on the parents, and it's really heartbreaking. But yeah, when you sort of think about, maybe this is the universe's or God's way of, and those kids are allocated to parents who can have that level of patience. That sort of made okay. I don't know if it's quite an oh my God moment, but for me that was like a turning point in my career. Yeah.
Do you think mental health is a problem in general, like with adults, kids? Is it quite often? Like, is it getting as a serious thing, or?
I think mental health is a huge problem. The WHO reckons that, I think, I don't know the exact year, but I think in 2028 or 2030, they estimate that 52% of the world's population will be depressed. And so when you think about that, 52 is the majority. And so once majority is depressed, then you got to think, well, maybe that's normal. Because that's how we define what's normal and what's abnormal. We often look at, well, most people are like this person's not, so you got to be abnormal. And so once majority is depressed, then maybe depressed is just being normal. So mental health is a huge problem. There's a lot of people who have post-COVID, they've sort of been seeking the meaning of life, and they're struggling. And the cost of living crisis that's existing around the world now is just adding to those woes. So it's quite the battle. But Nathan say, even if you're sort of financially well off, your mental well-being can be quite off. And then if you add to that, financially not being well off, it's just an additional strain. So it's no surprise that people are struggling. And there aren't any easy solutions. What I've found is, being grateful for the things that you have, for the relationships that you have, for the people that you have around you, that helps. Being kind and sort of giving, that helps. I have found that the more you give, the more you get, whether that's time, energy, or in kind, whatever you give sort of returns in some way or manner. Or at least it gives you some sort of sense of well-being that you're doing something useful for the world.
One advice that you want to give to young generation, how they can look after their mental health?
I think, so of course you speak to different experts, they'll tell you different things, and I'm no expert in mental health, but I do find that you sort of slow down a little bit and do a few things well, that helps. Whether that's just nurturing your own relationships, even if it's your relationships with your family or your friends, rather than looking at getting a big number of friends, you nurture the few friends that you have. Those sort of relationships, they help. Sort of detaching from the screen helps. And sort of thinking about what's important, what brings you joy. And doing acts of kindness, the more gratitude that you have and you're being kind. Sometimes even being kind to yourself helps, but being kind to other people helps more.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I think being thankful of what you have and everything, as you mentioned, Um, do you get a lot of people who've left Hervey Bay? They do come back, like especially in medical field.
Yeah, we it depends on what they've gone for. So we have found a few doctors who've left, for family reasons, and if they've got family elsewhere, they probably won't come back. But others who've moved for some other reason, who've maybe a bit of training or something, we do find that they sort of gravitate back to Hervey Bay. I do find, even though we're sort of a bit under-resourced for the population size that we have here, it is still a nice place to work and live. People are nice, the community is nice, it's got good weather. And I think the biggest attraction is probably just the people are nice. Somehow the good people have accumulated here.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Do you like? I know that the emergency department usually say that they always overworked because there is less beds. This is what you hear in local community. But is there any message to the people who are watching that if you're coming to emergency, just don't come because you have a small cut, or like something like what is classed emergency?
Well, I think so. Emergency is anything that can't wait. Certainly, there's something that needs to be addressed within, say, minutes to hours. So, of course, everyone's interpretation of emergency will slightly vary because of the other circumstances of what they've got. So, a simple cut might be okay to wait, maybe to see your doctor. But if it's in a part of the body that's more sensitive, it might be difficult, or if they're in a situation where they don't have anything that they can apply and sort of cover it, then they might still seek out. So we in general, as the emergency college rarely actually discourages people seeking emergency help. A lot of people that actually end up in emergency in their waiting rooms don't necessarily need emergency care, but they're there because there isn't an alternative. There isn't some other place that's open at that time of the night or that time of the weekend who have their doors open and will take you in. And so people often go there because there isn't an alternative. The government is looking at getting an alternative. I hear at some stage we're going to have an urgent care center in Hervey Bay, and that means that it's like a GP clinic but extended hours into the evening. So I think that should help. I tell people, like, if you have a problem that you feel is an emergency, you can come into emergency. You may end up waiting a bit if you're triaged as something that's not of a priority, but your waiting means that if you ever need something that needs urgent care, you wouldn't need to wait. So by asking some people to wait, it means that the true emergencies don't need to wait.
Yeah. Do you think there has been enough being done at the hospital for the growing population in Hervey Bay?
It's tricky, isn't it? I mean, we aren't resourced adequately for the population growth that Hervey Bay has experienced. Hervey Bay has become quite an attractive spot in Queensland and in Australia. You're seeing heaps of people move from Victoria, and you're in the real estate industry, so you would know that there's heaps of people from New South Wales and Victoria moving to Hervey Bay. It's a beautiful part of the world. People like it here, and they'll move here, and government spending for infrastructure, including hospitals, hasn't matched up that sort of growth rate. But they have their own constraints. When you think about it, can all the money that the government has be spent in the hospital and inpatient beds? And they can't, because it just means that less money will be spent elsewhere, whether that's roads and policing and schools. So it's got to be done in some sort of balance, and you trust that the government sort of taking all of that into consideration and weighing up the options and spending appropriately. So, but if you ask, in terms of growth, have the numbers kept up? No, it hasn't. We're hoping that things will change.
Yeah. Well, one advice you want to give to the audience or the younger generation who are watching?
Oh yeah, look, medicine's hard. A lot of things are hard. Medicine's also hard. And it's harder because often you have to spend a lot of your youth working really hard, studying really hard, and you'll feel like you're missing out when all of your friends are not, they're partying and having fun and exploring the world, when you're with your books and sort of studying for exams. It feels like it's a good career to have, because you're looking at the sort of, most of the time you're looking at the end product. The end product is an established doctor who's reasonably well off and having a thriving practice, that sort of thing. But you often don't see the struggling doctor struggling through medical school or pre-med medical school and just after medical school. So I'd say, look, if you like medicine and if you like that sort of thing, you expose yourself a little bit, either through school, see if you can get a bit of exposure either at a clinic or a hospital, and see if that's really what you like and want to do. And if it is, by all means, go for it. But don't do it because you think it's flashy or it's a great way to make money, or your parents are insisting, that's what you got to do. That you'd regret down the line, and then it'll be hard to undo that too. But look, if you're passionate about it, a lot of people are. People like enjoying and caring and relieving suffering. And in a way it's also therapeutic. You sort of, you feel good when you're able to help someone, and so even though a lot of times it's described as selfless, I feel it's a bit selfish, because you're doing it because when you do it well and someone gets better and you feel good, and so are you doing it because it's good for you, or are you doing it for... But then you can extend that to most people who are philanthropic. When Bill Gates donates, say, millions of dollars for a cause, is he doing it because he wants to cure malaria somewhere, or is he doing it because he feels good to do it? Look, but just on that. So okay, let me put it this way. There's a lot of people who are extremely rich, okay, and we're thinking, Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. There's a lot of people who are extremely rich. You got billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, but not a lot of them are spending it at causes that are worldwide worthy, and. I like that Elon Musk is thinking outside the box and thinking about going to Mars, and I think whether he ends up there or not, I think the journey to there itself will be having a lot of innovations. And I'm sure we'll end up with laser guns and things like that, and we've been seeing in sci-fi. Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that there'll be heaps of innovations that come along that journey that's useful for mankind. And I like that people like Bill Gates are spending a lot of their fortune trying to solve hunger, and trying to solve water shortage, and trying to solve malaria in African countries and things like that. So I like that they're using their money for big world problems, because at the same time, while they're doing that, there's people who are extremely rich, and all they're doing is looking after their family and the next generation and the generation after them, and 7 generations down. And so of course people critique these people, but I think it's great that they're doing things not just for them.
One favorite holiday destination that you would love to go?
We haven't traveled a lot. We want to travel a lot. We keep saying, once we're not busy enough, we'll start traveling, but we just haven't done that yet. We visited Udaipur once in Rajasthan, in North India. They've got a beautiful lake palace in Udaipur.
Oh yeah, the ones that's actually in the middle of the... Yeah.
And they take you in a little boat to the lake. So we went there a long time ago. It's a lovely experience. It's beautiful. The service is amazing. Rajasthan is a desert. It's in the middle of a desert. Yeah, we quite enjoyed that trip. That was quite nice. But look, at the end of the day, and you'd know this, Nitin. I mean, we enjoy going places based on who's with you. Yeah. And who's there when you get there. Because you could go to the most beautiful part of the world, but if you're by yourself and you traveled alone, maybe you won't enjoy it that much. But even if you went to some place that was, got a 1-star Google review, but you went with, a friend that you're really having fun with, and you'd have the time of your life. So often it's that. So I don't know that there's a clear destination like that, but yeah, it boils down to who's with you, who you're traveling with, and who's going to be there.
Yeah. Well, perfect, guys. I think we should call it end to our podcast. And I think what an amazing questions that was, answers that were Dr. Ajit. And we appreciate you coming to the show. All the audience who are watching, we just like to let you know, if you love the content that we do like, share, and subscribe the channel, because we're just starting off, and the more people it reaches, the better content we can create, and we can get some really amazing guests to the podcast and give a valuable input to our community and serve better through our channel. So do share, like, and subscribe, and thank you for watching. If you watched till the end, love it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.